Triple BE is a total failure. There will be total success. They will be equally wrong, as it were. So, yes, when you look at where we are, I personally, because the policy was much, there is a lot of fragmentation in the Treasury that doesn't quite align with the rest of government. The TTI, for example, all the sector departments, and so on and so forth. Forget about the state-owned entities and so on. So there's a lot of fragmentation. We must close these gaps that reduce the effectiveness of the policy. The Vice President made reference to the fact that I think the other thing, of course, is the Rainbow Nation, as it were. And we assume that there will be good faith. But we know that, looking back, that not quite. And so, in any country, if the government desires particular behavior, desires the market, the economy to behave in a particular way, if you can't do that by punitive capital, so I think that 20 years down the line, we are due to review the balance between the sticks and the carrots, the penalties and the incentives. Let me give you an example. A simple thing like submit your report about your compliance. We don't get compliance with that. Just reporting. And if we don't have the reports, we don't know, how far are we? Because the reports is about tool for monitoring progress. Who's complying, who's not complying, and what are the challenges? How do we deal with them? And what can we do as a commission? The president has already said, we don't have the powers. I wish I could impose penalties for non-reporting. So there are, I don't see that in the country, the space will be there, politically, the space will be there to have something better than what we have, as it were. So let's make this work. Let's not throw the baby with the bathwater, so to speak. It's the only tool we have that purposefully says we will discriminate in favor of black people, not against black people. It's the only one, the only policy that has got black people in its name. If we give it up in the hope for something better, I think we will make a mistake. Finally, let me just make a point about the legislation was passed by Parliament representing the people. It belongs to the people. It was passed by Parliament through different parties representing the people of South Africa. It is the legislation of the people. So we must renew the consensus, the social compact behind it, because it was a legislation to deal with one of the fundamental problems of this country, which is inequality, which you heard. Inequality, inequality, inequality. So we must renew the consensus, the social compact behind it, as it were. So it's not just going to strengthen the law, as it were, to strengthen it, to put in the penalty, political, that as well as effective system for it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. My next question for you, just to continue on that basis of, the different tools that we have within broad-based Black economic empowerment. One of the tools that would relate for everybody who's here today is enterprise and supplier development. It's a hot topic. Yesterday, you guys hosted a webinar discussing your research findings and with regards to ESD in our country. We know that companies that support enterprise and supplier development. Now, with the over-commercialization of ESDs in our country, do you think that they are effectively contributing to the sustainability of youth?
I believe that in the generation, the drafters of the codes had perfect foresight, wisdom, to recognize that enterprise and supplier development is probably one of the most important elements. Supplier development, one of the things that's happening in this country, companies, and so, it's not being forced to give Mr. Dlamini 20% of your company, all right? This is not just existing industries, new industries, properly. Now we heard that companies, many of them are happy to just spend, put the money, and so.
Now about having companies that don't want to continue the legacy of their businesses, and there are companies that are black-owned who are interested in, these white-owned companies that don't want to be legacy companies anymore because of, children don't want to take over the business. My question for you, following on that, is how does the Commission support a black business that has found, that's here today, where you support them to say, we know that this business is buying into...
We are custodian of the legislation. We call it, we are the referee. We're not the player necessarily, all right? So we don't quite get involved in transactions, as it were. We are the regulator. We make sure that, say, there are opportunities to pick against a domestic worker or a gardener to now very sophisticated front-end schemes. We expose those things. So where the opportunities are at the practical level, together, the signals must be sent to the DTI, the signal must be sent to organizations like the BBC to say, go look into that space, look at what's happening, look at the opportunities, where the opportunities are there,
Strategy in funding SMMEs, in ensuring that they are supported and growing as businesses.
Thank you very much. Perhaps before I respond to that, the question you've asked the Commissioner around the transition, and they can actually make a, and when you say use the proxy of the existing company, and not tell me about these new shareholders must have 5 years. So there's a way of doing these things. Back to African Bank, especially as you go down. What are we doing about that? Our strategy is, as you go down the pyramid, you have got lots and lots of volumes, right? So what we're doing is partnering with a fintech, in terms of which we are going to come to the market with a digital lending business aimed at that part of the market that is going to provide funding up to 5 million. People can keep revolving. Coverage, looking at this kind of transaction. There's a good representation that we've got the goodwill. I mean, what do you expect from blacks, right? I don't have to be taught to transform. It must be in your blood to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. And the last question I have for you is really just looking at time, is cash is king for small enterprises. What supply chain programs does African Bank have to support clients, both the buyer and the supplier, to optimize working capital?
It is true that a good part of the gap between buying stuff, selling it to my client. I can have a look at your invoice if I like the counterparty. I can advance a certain amount of money. So that closes the gap. We will have got 1 or 2 clients that we are exploring with. As a matter of fact, one has been approved. And yet there are so many people with such great ideas who went back. I'm sorry, I'm going to use this. These like the UK and the US. I mean, the venture capital sector is big.
Please do give him a round of applause for that. That same ethos.
The first point is,